Hello, I am Dr. LaDonna Osborn, and I'm welcoming you to this next episode of the Daisy Washburn Osborn 100 Years of Life, Ministry, and Influence. This has been a wonderful year of reflection and learning and really appreciating a woman who's historic on many, many levels. And we're learning things that help us in our lives today. My mother's example is often very raw. By that, I mean very close to where we all live, dealing with loss and criticism and failure and abandonment, loneliness, grief, all of these things. And we've seen her persevere. We've seen how God has used her and developed her in many ways, where her part in the overall ministry, the Osborn Ministries International, has been significant, pivotal in all that the ministry is known for yet today. Now, I want to take this episode and focus on some of the problems, the crises, family crises. I'm doing this because often we're asked, we hear about all the wonderful things in your life, we hear about the successes, but why don't you tell us about some of the ugly things, the sad things, the failures? Well, we have never practiced doing that because people have their own problems. And we've always wanted to come with an uplift, reminding people that regardless of what happens, you can press through. You can, with God on your side, you can press through. And of course, my mother's life is a great example of that. But so I want to just take a moment and share some personal things that she endured in her life as a woman, as a mother. And this has to do with the loss of children. This is, any of you who have lost a child, whether it's through premature death or an accident or even an abortion, these things mark you, if I can say it that way. For a mother, it creates an indelible heart scar. I've lost a daughter. I know what this feels like. So when I reflect on what my mother went through, I appreciate her journey more than I did before I lost my own daughter. So let's go back. You'll remember that 1 year after my father and mother married, they lost their first child, Marie LaVon. That was in 1943. Now, it happened by the time they're in ministry. I have been born. My brother's been born, then I have been born. And then in 1955, their fourth child was born. It was also a girl, and she didn't live long. Just as with the first child, it was an unnecessary loss. This was really, today we would call it malpractice. It was, I can't go into detail, but it was unnecessary for this beautiful, healthy baby to not be born alive. So this was another loss. Her name was Mary Elizabeth. And so this was the last child that my mother had. And I've told you, my mother loved family. She valued family so highly, likely because her own family was so dysfunctional. And she purposed that her family would be loved and would be balanced and would be raised in the fear of the Lord and so on. But then it happened. So here in 1943, she's lost a child. 1950, she's lost a child. And my brother, Tommy Lee Osborn Jr., we called him TL2. He passed away in 1979. He was only 34 years old. Now, this was a tremendous loss for my parents. Losing a baby, I did not lose babies, but I'm sure losing a baby has indescribable pain that goes with it. But losing an adult child, which was my case, that's a friend. That's a person who's been part of your life, that you have memories with, you have future plans with. So my brother, he was a very gifted man. He was in and out of ministry. He was a musician, very charismatic, a wonderful person. And when he passed, I remember the pain that my mother and father went through. We spent the whole first night together. We just were weeping and not even talking, just weeping and praying and groaning before the Lord. So I watched what my parents went through. It happened that we can learn a great lesson from this. Yes, they endured loss. Yes, loss came to our family. Yes, disappointments come. Yes, things that you can't explain. Listen to me. When you can't explain something, don't try. Just trust God. That's the lesson. But I want to tell you how my parents coped with my brother's passing. They had already made a commitment to go to France for a season of ministry. And so when this happened, after my brother's funeral, after a time of being with other family members and so on, they debated. Certainly, they would be allowed to cancel that event. People would understand. But they talked about it. They prayed about it. I was there when they were discussing this, and they made a decision to keep their commitment. And this was their thinking, and this is what I want you to take away from this episode. They said, in ministering to others, we ourselves will be healed. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that simple? It sounds like a wonderful pattern for how do you face loss and grief. You can become trapped in your grief. You can become encapsulated with your own emotions and your own thoughts. You can cut people out. You can resist the comfort and the words of others. There's many reactions. But how about doing what they did? Reaching out to others at your deepest time of grief and loss. That's what they did. In ministering to others, we will be healed. Now, I know they always carried that sense of loss over my brother's passing, but they continued in ministry. They continued joyfully. They continued with hope. They continued ministering and lifting others in spite of what they had been through. And so that's what I want to share from my mother's life and her experience with you. You may have already faced loss. Maybe you will in the future. But remember, let this seed penetrate your own person, your own personhood, that when you grieve, don't shut yourself in with your grief. Reach out, because in reaching out, you will be healed and you have a future. God bless you.